Have you ever turned on your tap and wondered what's really in your water? Is there really a way to know for sure? Hello, and welcome to episode 25 of What About Water? I'm Jeff Szabo, Chief Executive Officer of the Suffolk County Water Authority, which provides drinking water to approximately 1.2 million Suffolk County residents in New York. The Suffolk County Water Authority runs tens of thousands of tests each year to make sure our water quality meets the highest standards. The data we collect has always been available, but it wasn't always the easiest to know your specific water quality. In April, SCWA launched a new tool called My Water Quality, which lets customers get a personalized report on the water being delivered right to their tap. Joining me today are two people to discuss why this tool is so innovative and what it means for customers. Chris Niebling is our Deputy Director of Laboratory Services, and Dan Dubois is SCWA's Director of Communications and External Affairs. Chris, Dan, welcome.
Happy to be here.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Jeff.
So Dan, let's start with a couple of basics. Can you give our listeners a quick overview of how the SCWA system works from the aquifer to the tap?
Sure, Jeff. So we're unique here on Long Island. We draw all of our water from our sole source aquifer. It's about 65 trillion gallons of water right below our feet. And we do that at about 600 different public supply wells that we have from the county line in the west at Melville all the way out to Montauk. We're on Shelter Island and also on Fire Island. After we draw the water from the aquifer, we treat it with advanced treatment systems to ensure, like you said, that we're meeting the highest quality standards. And then we distribute it to a complex network of over 6,000 miles of water main. It's important to know that we don't do this at one central location. We're all over our distribution area, all over Suffolk County. I think a lot of people might think that we're just, drilling water from one place and kind of sending it all over the island. The system doesn't work that way. It's really a lot of smaller systems working together.
I think a lot of times, too, people think that our system is completely interconnected, and that's not necessarily true either. We can't move water from Amityville, water from one pump station or drinking water well in Amityville all the way even to like West Islip.
That's absolutely right. It's important that people know that the water that they're getting at their tap really comes from their neighborhood, from wells that are, right in their community nearby. And our wells, they're drilled to a variety of depths, and that's based on the local geology. We have some wells that are just a couple hundred feet deep to some that are as deep as 800 feet. And that can really have an impact on the sort of contaminants or the water quality that we see at each of our wells.
Dan, can you explain a little bit about pressure zones and why they might not give a full or accurate picture of the water that's coming into a customer's home?
Yeah, so pressure zones are something that we use to maintain constant pressure throughout our system at different elevations. As we mentioned before, our system isn't one large system. It's a lot of smaller systems working together. And we do this to make sure that our customers are getting the appropriate pressure at their home. If you were in a situation where you had a home at a high elevation and we're pumping water from a lower elevation, the water coming out of your tap would come out really slow. It wouldn't work really well. Conversely, if you're at low elevation, high elevation pump nearby, you would get an enormous amount of pressure coming out of your tap. So we use these pressure zones to make sure that we've got even pressure throughout the system. And we've got about 50 different zones throughout our entire distribution system. Now, customers in the same pressure zone may receive water from different wells or treatment facilities depending on demand and usage and different patterns, but they're still in their neighborhood, as I said before. You're not getting water from, the other side of the pressure zone. And in some cases, those zones can be very big. Zone 1, for example, stretches all the way from Babylon in the west, all the way out to Mastic in the east. So it's important that our customers understand that just because you're in one pressure zone doesn't mean you're getting water from that entire area. It's really just a way for us to build a system that works for proper distribution.
So how does that differ from other drinking water suppliers from across the country?
Yeah, so SCWA system is really decentralized. As I mentioned, we've got 600 different public supply wells. We're pumping it at 240 different locations. Now, in other parts of the country, especially the bigger systems, you see a lot of surface water as used for the drinking water source. So you might have, in a large city, they're getting their water from a river or a reservoir, a large lake around the Great Lakes, for example. And what that generally means is that they're getting their water from one or two places in the system, which means that they only have to test at 1 or 2 locations. We're testing at 600 different locations. So the number of tests that we have is just enormous in comparison. Our drinking water quality report is a much larger document than you'll see in other drinking water providers across the country. I have a funny story about this, actually. I was traveling with some friends about a year ago, and we're staying in a Airbnb, and one of my friends goes to the sink, and they're going to get a glass of water, and they stop for a second, and she says, "I'm not sure if the water is safe to drink here. I don't know." And of course, me being the water guy, they all look at me and say, "Can we drink the water here?" Again, not a normal person here. I don't think anyone else would do this, but I pulled up the water quality report, went to go see what they were reporting in their test results. And I'm used to seeing SCWA's water quality report, which is 50 plus pages. It's an enormous document. The document that I pulled up was 2 pages, just because they only had one source that they're pulling from, say a lot less tests to run. So I think that's a good example of how we're a little different than other places in the country.
It's a great example. I remember a couple of years ago, Chris might remember this. As a member of the EPA's National Drinking Water Advisory Board, I served on a committee that was looking at annual drinking water reports and the requirements and what should be in those reports for consumers, and how do we make them really, how do we make sure that people can understand the data that's in them and keep them relevant? And we at the Water Authority had a document that I think it's over 60 pages, if I think, right, Chris?
Yeah, it's around 51 right now.
51. And then you had us with all of our test results, thousands and thousands of test results and data. And then you had other large suppliers from across the country, and it was a page or 2. And that really hit me at that point. Like, what is going on here? Don't you think you'd use this opportunity to issue this, mandated report about drinking water and have some more valuable information in there? But they didn't do it. So we shall see. But moving forward, we try to keep ours as updated and as current and as informative as we possibly can. Chris, talk a little bit about testing from the aquifer and testing water that's delivered to the homes.
Yeah, Jeff, there's a difference between, the testing at the aquifer versus testing, the water that is delivered to people's homes. Just a quick overview in terms of the aquifer testing. We have 243 pump stations throughout our distribution system with around 585 active wells, basically pulling from the aquifer at different depths. Just to give you an example of some of the testing at the aquifer, we test what's called the raw water, which is basically the water coming directly out of the ground. We also test if there's some sort of filtration system there, before filters, after filters, and we test the final product, what we call treated. And what I mean by treated is that the water has gone through either some sort of filtration, and then the final 2 steps are that we add hydrated lime to the water. And what this does is adjust the pH of the water to a more neutral pH between 7 and 8. Our groundwater is naturally acidic, okay? And if we keep that at a naturally acidic level, what could happen at your in your plumbing in your house is that it could start to etch some of the solder, some of the plumbing there, and you could get these heavy metals that could, show up in your tap water, such as lead. We don't want that. So that's the reason why we add the hydrated lime to the water. And then the final step, we add chlorine to disinfect. Okay, now the testing the water delivered to your homes, we utilize roughly 334 sample stations that are located throughout our distribution system. These are spread out kind of evenly throughout. There are these little green boxes around 2 feet. They kind of blend in. They're on residential streets.
Typically on the side of the road, you may see a green box there, but that's a water sample station.
Correct. And, they're in industrial parks. And then our staff at the lab basically goes to these sites weekly. Twice a year, we collect complete sets of over, testing for over 400 different compounds at these sites. And, the main reason for this is that we want our customers to get an accurate representation of the water quality coming directly to their tap. Okay. And in some cases, because our distribution system is so vast, roughly over 6,000 miles of water main, you could have multiple wells running, multiple wells supplying your home. So that's the reason why we go to these sample stations yearly.
So that makes a lot of sense. There's a tremendous amount of data that's collected, and we're required to supply that through the annual drinking water quality report that we publish each June 1st.
Yeah, it's due actually, May 31st. We're actually wrapping that up right now as we speak. It's a lot of data, thousands and thousands of lines of review. And like I mentioned earlier, that report is about 50 or 51 pages long. There's a lot of useful information in there, so that's pretty much about to be published as we speak.
But that very valuable and informative report will have 2024 data, right?
Yeah, correct. We're always, a year behind in terms of, the data that we report. So in 2025, we're reporting 2024 data. That way, all that data has been, reviewed properly and then, finalized and then put in that report.
So certainly, if customers of the Water Authority have questions about their particular water quality, they can call our customer contact center and request a technician come to the home and take some samples. And they can certainly at any point talk to people on your staff at the laboratory, Chris, and they can explain test results and things like that. But the thought was, how do we give them the most current information as quickly as possible? And that sort of led us to the creation of My Water Quality, this new tool that we have on our website. Dan, talk to us about it. How did we get here?
Yeah, so as you said, Jeff, we're always hearing from our customers that they want the most up-to-date information. They want to get, the best picture that we can provide them of the testing that we do, the results of the treatment, and what is the water quality at their tap. So we do have customers who call and they request a sample being taken directly from their home, and we do certainly do that. But we've got 1.2 million customers, over 400,000 accounts. It's hard for us to test every single place, right? But we have all this data. So the question was, how can we be more transparent with our customers? How can we provide them with the scientific data they're really looking for? So a few years ago, we started a new strategic plan for the Water Authority. We called it Strategic Plan 2030. And we were kind of laying out a roadmap for towards the end of the decade, what we wanted to do at SCWA to make sure that we are, a top tier water provider. And so we laid out lots of different plans and things that we want to do. And one of the through lines, I think, through many of our goals was increasing transparency with our customers. So we had 10 different objectives that we wanted to complete. And one of them was certainly on water quality. And so we had a group of our experts getting together, talking about what did we want to achieve in the next few years to really improve what we were providing our customers in terms of data. And I was in that room, and I remember this person here to my right, Chris Niebling, said, "Hey, I've got this great idea for a tool that I think we can do." So actually, Chris, I'll kick this over to you. Where was the impetus for coming up with this, and how'd you think of it?
Yeah, Dan, like you had mentioned earlier, our consumer confidence report, there's so much data in there, okay? And like you had mentioned, one particular zone, and we have to basically split it up into our distribution zones. We have 28 of those. Okay, so zone one, like you said, could go from Babylon all the way out to West Hampton. Okay, so the water quality in West Hampton versus Babylon could be completely different. So my thought process was that we have all these sample stations in place, like I mentioned, around 334 that are spread out evenly throughout our system. Let's go there. Let's do complete tests, sampling. So that way the customer is actually getting a true representative water quality report that's actually coming out of their tap. That was the main, reason for me coming up with that idea.
Yeah, I think the example you gave at the time, which really demonstrated, is that if you have a well in, say, Babylon, and you've got slightly elevated levels of one contaminant, and then you've got a well in West Hampton, which has a slightly elevated level of a separate contaminant, both below the maximum contaminant level, but slightly higher than you might see other places. Well, if I'm living in Patchogue, right in between, I'm not getting water from either of those two wells. I look at the report and you see the high detection levels at each of those locations, and you're thinking, well, I've got this and I've got this. But in reality, because you're getting water from a well in Patchogue, you have neither of those. So I think this tool really gives our customers the best and fullest picture of what they're actually getting at their tap.
And that's probably the most beneficial aspect of the program for our customers, right?
Absolutely.
The most accurate, the most current, too, water quality data that they can get. So talk a little specifically about what a customer needs to do in order to access this information.
Part of this app, which is on our website, basically what you're doing is that you're clicking on the application. It's going to bring you to an interactive map. And basically on that map there'll be instructions on how to read this water quality report, because it is involved. It's about 7 pages long. There's a lot of big, long scientific compound names on there. So, we try to, make it as simple as possible. But then besides that, after that, then all you do is just type in your address, It's going to bring you to your house. You're going to see a blue dot on top of your house. You double click on that, and then that 7-page water quality report will come up, and then you're able to just kind of scroll through it and see what's actually coming, to your tap.
And there's a lot of complex mechanics that are going on in the background, but we've tried to make it as easy as possible for our customers. So it looks pretty simple. You click, you type in your address, you go right there, you get your report. But there's a lot of things going on in the background to make sure that you're getting the right information from the right testing.
So, Chris, what are some of the things, if you're a customer and not Deputy Director of Laboratory Services, but if you pull up your address and you start looking at the report, what are some of the things that you're interested in and you're looking for? Or put the other hat on, you're an employee here, in charge of a laboratory. What are some things that stand out, some of the compounds of interest?
In that report, like I had mentioned earlier, we are testing and looking for around 400 different compounds and contaminants. The majority of that report, you are going to see ND or non-detect. That's a good thing. But there are things such as emerging contaminants that you might want to take a look at, such as PFAS contaminants, 1,4-dioxane, contaminants like that, to see if whether or not they're actually in my drinking water. In most cases, they're not. You're going to see non-detect. So that's kind of what you're looking for in that report. Also in that report, you're going to have your, naturally occurring compounds. These are your minerals like calcium, potassium, magnesium. These are essential for the human body. They're good for you. They're not a bad thing. So you are going to see some positives, but for the majority, you are going to see more non-detect.
Gotcha. And Chris, we've often talked about having stricter internal standards for compounds than we're required to. What does that mean for us long term?
Yeah, so the ultimate goal at the Water Authority for contaminants, or we call emerging contaminants, is to treat to non-detect. That's the ultimate goal. And by doing this, what we're doing is placing filtration systems, in place to treat to non-detect. Ultimately, moving forward, for our customers, the goal is to supply, the best possible drinking water we can to our customers moving forward. And by having that policy here at the Water Authority, to, ensuring that things will get better as we move forward.
One of the things we talk about frequently here is combating misinformation. There's a tremendous amount of misinformation out there from various media sources related to drinking water quality. Dan, how do you see folks using this tool with that respect?
Jeff, there's definitely a lot of information out there in the news and on the internet that people will read about, the aquifer and what's out there. And you might see an article or a story about something leaking into some sort of pollution. And as Chris was talking about before, I think it's really important that our customers understand that what we pull out of the aquifer, the raw water, isn't what's being served to our customers, right? That is being treated with our advanced treatment systems. We're making sure that we test it every step along the way. So what they're actually getting at their tap isn't necessarily what they might read about in the news. So this tool really gives them the information and empowers them to know exactly what's out there. So if you read an article in one of your local publications and you're like, well, now I don't know what to think. They say this thing. Now you can actually see the testing data that's right at your tap, and that's really empowering for our customers. The other thing that, besides just misinformation, is disinformation. It's unfortunate to say, but there is a profit incentive for a lot of companies to make them mistrust their water provider. The bottled water industry is now a $100 billion industry, and just in 2000, it was only a $6 billion industry. That's an enormous amount of growth in 25 years. And they've basically done that by making people, consumers, mistrust their drinking water provider. The way their industry has grown has convinced people that they can't trust what's at the tap and they need to go to the product that's being sold to them. They're not doing it by beating us on quality. Their standards that they have to meet are in most cases much lower than the standards that we have to meet, and they don't have to disclose their results like we do to our customers. They're not doing it on price. They're not beating us on price. A gallon of bottled water costs 1,000 times more than what we provide at the tap. They're not beating us on protecting the environment. The amount of plastic waste and the transportation costs of bottled water is enormous. So the way that they've really pushed their industry forward is by creating that distrust. And this tool gives our customers the opportunity to get the facts, to know exactly what's at their tap without having to get a separate test from a private company or calling up our customer service and getting a sample taken at their home. They can just go online and get those results immediately. And I think that's really empowering for them.
So have we seen a lot of customers go to scwa.com/mywaterquality and look at the results? What are we hearing from our customers?
Yeah, so we've just launched this tool in April. So we're definitely letting people know that this is out there and they have that opportunity. The feedback that we've gotten has initially been very positive. I think a lot of people are very excited about this. They're happy that we are being transparent with them and giving them the information that they've been looking for. So, overall, the response has been fantastic. We look forward to continuing to communicate this to our customers and letting more people know that this opportunity is there for them.
Chris, are there any plans to expand or enhance the tools in the future? Adding more data or more sample stations or functionality, anything like that?
This project here is going to be constantly evolving. We will continue to look for any sort of, maybe sampling gaps in our distribution system and add more sample stations as needed. Our GIS department will continue to work on the interactive map to make it bigger and better. It was a big project for them to undertake. They had to make sure all the coordinates of the sample stations were in place, and then ultimately at the end of the day, make sure when you type in your address that water quality report does appear. So that's been a big project, and we feel that it's just going to continue to be ongoing. As we expand here, in some cases, we're taking over some, water suppliers, so we'll add new stations there, as needed. So I think for now we're in good shape, but there's definitely, always room for improvement.
So thank you both for appearing today on the podcast and for sharing this information with our listeners. There's a lot of information out there about drinking water, some of it accurate, but a lot of it not. Various groups have a financial incentive for you not to trust what comes from your tap, and it's our job to be as transparent as possible and to make sure you're getting accurate information as easily as possible. You can see for yourself what your personalized report looks like. Go to www.scwa.com/mywaterquality, type in your address and get the results for yourself. Chris, Dan, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jeff. This is great.
Thanks, Jeff. My pleasure.
What About Water is produced by Jeff Szabo, Theodore Aponte, and Dan Dubois. If you enjoyed What About Water, be sure to rate us and to leave a review. Help spread the word by telling a friend and by following the Suffolk County Water Authority on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm Jeff Szabo.